So when you talk about pork, do you have any examples off the top of your head, but something that might not be related to Afghanistan, or even another pork project that you think is pork? Because I know at Hawaii Reporter we do a lot of tracking of pork.
Yes.
And we even publish Citizens Against Government Waste has a Porker of the Month, Porker of the Year. In fact, Neil Abercrombie's been Porker of the Month and was candidate for Porker of the Year at one point when he was in Congress. So how does it, what can you think of any examples to give people an idea?
Actually, Malia, not just with this war supplemental bill, but I think generally the whole appropriations process in the United States Congress is broken. And if I could expand this a little bit more, I support a moratorium on earmarks. And for those who aren't familiar with earmarks, I think that's more traditionally, people understand it as pork, that members of Congress go in and insert a particular project that they want funded, $10 million here, $20 million there, and try to get get the American taxpayer to fund all of this. This is irresponsible. And there's a whole bunch of examples out there. You pick any budget from any year, and you're going to find a chock full of examples to which I think things are breaking down and proper. On the war funding in Afghanistan specifically, I'll give you an example. Somewhat tangentially related, there's a measure in there to tear down the Fort Hood processing center. There was, of course, the terrible tragedy of the gun shooting in Fort Hood. The facility is perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be torn down. But to create more work, and I guess $16 million to just create a new building out there, we're inserting that in the war funding bill. It has nothing to do with the actual fight in Afghanistan. I think that's unreasonable. I think that needs to change. And let's vote on, ironically, let's just vote on what the president submitted to the Democratic-controlled Congress.
Right.
The American people can understand that, but they can't understand all these machinations that Congress is currently engaged in.
So moving on to one other thing that you really have been promoting, and that is the free trade agreements.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Malia, amongst the first things I've done in Congress, actually, the very first thing I did when I got elected to Congress was sign on as a co-sponsor to the Federal Balanced Budget Amendment. But after that, other pieces of legislation, and amongst my first pieces of legislation, was to sign on and advocate for the free trade agreement with South Korea and advocate for a free trade agreement with the Philippines. I think these are important steps and important things for our nation as a whole, and important for Hawaii in particular. Free trade benefits our nation. The more we're able to tie ourselves with our allies, increase commerce, the more we develop an understanding, the more I think the American values of liberty and democracy are extended. And these are positive things. But they also benefit the American worker because they allow us to sell more of our goods overseas. For us here in Hawaii, it is particularly important because the #1 sector of our economy is tourism. And the more we have commerce, the more we have trade and ties with foreign countries, the more tourism we get. And what we have to understand here in Hawaii is right now the #1 country for our visitors in the state of Hawaii is Japan. But Japan isn't a growing sector for us here in Hawaii. I mean, the number of Japanese tourists, although fluctuating from year to year, is not a rapidly growing market for us here in Hawaii. The real places where we're going to find a rapid growth in the number of visitors is not going to be Japan. It's going to come from places like South Korea, places like Taiwan, Singapore, and of course the big one out there is China. And I'm very happy that after having signed on, advocating for a free trade agreement, and incidentally, my very first substantive floor speech that I gave as a member of Congress was to advocate for a free trade agreement with South Korea. I'm very happy that the president has agreed, and finally seen, after 2 years as president, to commit himself to a free trade agreement with South Korea. And that's something that I'm excited about, and I'm going to push very, very actively for.
Now, what does that mean exactly? Does he have to, process-wise, does he have to approve it, or does the whole Congress have to approve it? How does it work?
What happens right now is the United States has already actually agreed upon a free trade agreement with South Korea. It actually was done in the prior administration. The problem has been is that this agreement has languished in Congress. Congress has not given this free trade agreement with South Korea a clean up or down vote. And part of the difficulty is I think the Congress, controlled by Democrats right now, was hesitant as to where President Obama stood on this trade agreement. I'm happy that the President is in agreement with my position that we should advance this trade agreement. I am cautiously optimistic that the Congress now will finally take up this issue and do what it should have done a long time ago, which is give a straight up or down vote on a free trade agreement between the United States and South Korea.
And if it passes, then the president approves it and it's all fine?
Yes, okay. So that's all done. And you know, Malia, one other thing I also want to quickly mention here, why I think the free trade agreement with South Korea is so important. Not just because it's going to increase trade, not just because it's going to increase jobs, and not just because it's going to create economic activity for us here in Hawaii. It is also important because the Korean Peninsula is exceptionally volatile. North Korea right now, unfortunately, it looks like they're trying to do some machinations to create a dynastic transfer of power from Kim Jong-il to his son. It is a rogue state that has developed a nuclear weapon. It is a nation to which I think brings a lot of instability into North Asia. I think it is important for the United States as a nation to tie and ally itself even more closely, both trade-wise as well as with security with South Korea. So we stand firm and clear that we will not accept this Stalinist regime in North Korea. And for all of us here in Hawaii, we have to be very sensitive that Hawaii is one of the very few places in the United States of America that rests within the flight arc of North Korea's ballistic missiles. This is a dangerous position for us here, that North Korea has ballistic missiles that can hit our state, and it's a nuclear-armed nation. And that's all the more reason why I'm encouraged by and will continue to advocate for this free trade agreement with South Korea, as well as the Philippines and throughout the world.
Right. So I know we worry about that a lot in Hawaii, about North Korea and the instability. So do we know for sure that they've actually developed weapons that can reach us yet? Or there's always that controversy of can they reach us, or they're still working on it? I don't know if we do.
As I understand things, what Korea has developed is, number one, they have developed a nuclear weapon, and that's actually undisputed. Second, they have developed ballistic missiles that can reach Hawaii, and unfortunately, they have tested a couple that are within range of Hawaii. What North Korea thus far has not developed is a targeting system. So in other words, they have missiles that can reach Hawaii, but thankfully for us, for now at least, North Korea's missiles can't hit within 1,000 miles of us because they can't exactly target. But I'm concerned about this, and I think all of us as Americans should be concerned. In order to land a ballistic missile, you need three things, and to really create havoc. You need a nuclear bomb, you need a ballistic missile, and you need a targeting system. North Korea has the first two. Iran has the second two. I'm very much afraid with the regimes in North Korea and Iran, it's only a function of time before they start talking and manage to find a way so that each of those two rogue states have all three. And for us here in Hawaii, we have got to be very, very concerned about that. And that's why I hope the United States eventually adopts a clear position of regime change in North Korea.
And we also have to keep supporting the ballistic missile testing place on Kauai, right?
Yes, Barking Sands is an important component for our national defense, but I think it's critical for us here in Hawaii to have an anti-missile ballistic defense system right here in the islands to prevent a terrible situation like North Korea having a nuclear weapon, having a ballistic missile, and then acquiring a targeting system. We don't want that to occur. And all the reason why I think it's incumbent upon our nation to make sure we commit ourselves to open, free, united Korea under a democratic government.
Great. Okay. Well, we have lots of things to talk about. So,
yes.
I wanted to ask you something a little different. You were in the city council, and now you're in the federal government. So obviously, you have both perspectives.
Yes.
But one of the big issues we're dealing with right now is the city and the EPA fighting with each other over the sewage quality and so on. And since you were in the city council, you dealt with this issue up until recently, and now you have the federal perspective. Tell me, can you give us an overview of what's going on with that?
Yeah, sure. You know, while I am happy that the city government has finally settled with the EPA and committed Honolulu to coming into compliance with the Clean Water Act, I am disappointed it took the city over 6 years and $10 million in legal fees to come to this conclusion. What people should understand is the Clean Water Act, which was passed back in the early 1970s, mandated exactly what it said, clean water. And in Honolulu remained one of less than 1% of all cities in the United States of America that was not in compliance with the Clean Water Act. The Hanneman administration adopted an exceptionally aggressive legal position to fight in court, spent $10 million of taxpayer resources on attorneys to continue to fight. And then now, as the mayor has decided he wants to be governor, finally settled with the EPA. My position has long been, for years ago, that we should just settle with the EPA, acknowledge that the city should come into compliance with the federal law, and let's build out a 20-year or 30-year project plan to bring us into compliance. The city now has agreed with the position I have long advocated for years, but I'm disappointed it took the city 6 years and $10 million in legal fees to come to that conclusion. We could have saved a lot of time and a lot of money, and instead of employing a lot of lawyers.